Good morning. Let's dive right in because I'm told this might be a little long today. Yeah, the choir wasn't able to get it in on time because of me, or else Carol. I think it was Carol. Yeah, it was Carol. There are two figures in today's gospel story that contrast with each other, the Pharisee and the tax collector. And there's a larger context in which they work that informs in which they exist, that informs our engagement with this reading. So I want to talk first about the contrast between the two, and then I want to talk about the irony that's present in this whole parable. So before we start all that, we need to look at who Jesus is talking to. Because he's got a very specific audience this week. It's not like other weeks where he's talking in a worship setting or where he's talking to the larger community or to his disciples. In this case, he's speaking specifically to people who see themselves as righteous and hold others in contempt. A very specific group of people. None of us are there, right?
No.
Yeah. But we'll go ahead and listen. Right? All of us do that sometimes. Hopefully not all the time, but sometimes. So he is speaking to us, but this is a very, very pointed message by him, as he tends to do. Some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. That's who his intended audience is. Now, contempt is something that happens inside of us, right? It's an inner thing of the heart. And there are modes of psychology today in our culture who say, feel what you want. Think what you want. It's when you act on it that you become accountable. That's actually not what Jesus is saying. What he's saying is that what goes on in your heart and in your mind is important. It impacts your salvation and your relationship with God, and it impacts the church and the world, even if you never act on it. It still impacts the church and the world. Paul says, we have this treasure in clay jars. That's 2 Corinthians 4:7. We have this treasure in clay jars. So we are not perfect, but we carry the divine life of God. So what goes on inside of us does matter. It reminds me, I had a doctor years ago who had a sign up in her office that said, take care of your body. If you don't, where will you live? And this is a similar thing. Take care of your heart. If you don't, where will God live?
Very good.
This is what Jesus is speaking to in part. In part. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 16. We are the temple of the living God. As God said, I will live in them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. So what's going on inside each of us is important. And each of us should attend to what's happening inside ourselves. Not other people, but ourselves, right? And Jesus draws a stark contrast between this Pharisee and this tax collector in his story. And sets out a series of things that the Pharisee is doing wrong. I mean, this is a villain. This is the bad guy in this story. The first thing is that this Pharisee has someone between him and God. In essence, he's triangulating. He's just talking to God about himself, and he's using other people as the core foundation of his prayer. If you look at what he prays, all these people he names, adulterers and thieves and even this tax collector, stand between him and God. If they're removed from his prayer, there's no substance to it. Certainly no glorifying to God. Just thanks that I'm so great, not like these people. So if you take them out, there's nothing to that prayer. Whereas the tax collector is encountering God directly and talking directly, him before God. And the Pharisee has placed God in an improper role, a role of confidant, of equal. He has drawn a line, and he and God are on one side, and the tax collector and everyone else is on the other. Now, I don't want to imply that you can't talk intimately with God, because you can. It would be really bad for me to say that, because plenty of you have heard me say prayers that start with, dude. Right? Are you in Sequim today? Because we need some help here. You can talk to God like that. That's not disrespectful, that's intimate. But what we can't do is set God on the same level as ourselves. As Frederick Schmidt used to say, there is a God, it's not you. And the Pharisee has made the two of them buddies. He does nothing to glorify God. Certainly he doesn't see God as a judge or the king of all the universe. Whereas the tax collector does. The tax collector places himself in his prayer in the right relationship. Acknowledging who God is and confessing who he is. Here's another thing that the Pharisees doing wrong, and it's actually sad. He's all done. There's not a bit of growth or transformation or hope or further exploration or learning in his life. He's done. He's all fixed. He's top of the world and nowhere left to go. That's kind of sad. Self-satisfied as he is. Can you think of anything sadder? As Christians, we're called into a life that jumps from level to level to level. Yesterday at the funeral we had here, one of the things we prayed for the deceased person was that she might go from level to level forever in her service to God. That's what we expect. That's what we hope for. It will always be new, always be fresh. There will always be something to learn and somewhere to go in our Christian life. Not for this Pharisee. And you get the sense that though the tax collector doesn't actually call on that possibility, he's open to it in his prayers in that setting. Another really sad thing that the Pharisee does, and we'll go into it a little more, is that in having contempt for someone in the community, he violates the community itself. He violates that community by looking down on one of his own. We have to ask ourselves, when we encounter that, how do we do that? How do we have contempt for someone else that violates the community we live in? How can we recognize mercy if we have none? It's sad, again, a lonely place to be and a fracture to the community around us. And again, the tax collector, because of his own need for mercy, will be merciful when he sees others. And the last thing in this laundry list of things that the Pharisee did wrong is that he assumes he can look at someone else and judge their heart. That he can see all that another person is to God and how that person should be judged. Not himself, of course, but somebody else. But God knows not only what we do, but what we're capable of. Not only who we are in this moment, but the gifts he has given us to be developed. He knows our hearts, and he looks with mercy and love. And those times when we are that, we want to recognize that we are and work with the power of God that we carry in us to become more and more like a tax collector. But here's that irony that I was talking about. Something that maybe isn't as evident when we first encounter this story. We have two figures here. They live on two ends of a continuum. The tax collector is unclean, and he is denigrated in his culture for the work he does for his living. And he can never be clean because he handles Roman money. And handling Roman money makes you unclean, makes you ritually unclean. So by virtue of the way he makes his living, he will always be at the outside of this society, never fully integrated into it. And the Pharisee is an elite person in this society. He is a scholar, he's well-to-do, he is a leader, he helps to set the rules and enforce them to keep this culture going, to keep this faith strong. That's who he is in this society. That Pharisee's position in his society depends on something. It depends on the peaceful occupation of the Romans. He needs peace. In order to exist in his elite position, perhaps in order to exist at all, he needs peace between the Jews and the Romans. Oppressive as Roman rule is, they cannot conquer Rome, so they need peace. And that peace is obtained through the taxes that the tax collector collects. Do you see the position of this Pharisee? He is holding in contempt the person who supports the system he benefits from. You see the fracture in this community? Not advocating for his brother Jew, not standing for him, but exploiting him and looking down on him is how this Pharisee exists as he does. A horrible wound to God for one of his children to live like that. A horrible wound to God for one of his children to inflict that kind of a pain on his own community. And here's the further irony. It's God who's telling this story. God who has humiliated himself to become human, not humbled. God who's on his way to Jerusalem and that final passion where he will die for the Pharisee. It's really a strong and astonishing message from Jesus. As we look at our hearts and how we live, we need also to look at the systems that we benefit from that allow us to look at our hearts. For the systems that we benefit from that allow us to live the lives we live. And to look for those who support these systems and never reap any rewards from them. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. God is glory, and we carry the power of God, and in seeking after holiness of heart and humility in our lives, we glorify Him by changing our hearts, by changing the systems that oppress our brothers and sisters. And we don't do it alone. Thank goodness. We don't have to do it under our own power. Listen again to the full statement from Hall. 2 Corinthians 4:7. We have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not